Hello, everybody, and welcome to the live. Here I am back in London, just arrived back yesterday from my land trip to Vegas and Palm Springs. Great to see so many people joining, piling in, and so it's really good to see everybody. I've got some sound feedback. I had some problems with the mic a bit earlier, but it seems to be working now when I was doing setup. So hopefully that's all working fine. So let's have a look. Loads of people coming in, so I will say hellos as we go. Just a couple of housekeeping bits and pieces. Just a reminder, this is live, so it's entirely driven by the questions that I get asked by the people here. If you're watching this afterwards, which is fantastic, just remember this is completely driven by the questions I get asked. It's not a regular video. I do bring up the questions as we go through, so you should be able to skip through if that's what you want to do and see, kind of see the questions, jump ahead, and so on. Just a reminder, if you do have a question, please write the word question so that I can spot the questions easier amongst all the various chitting and chatting. So a couple of bits and pieces. As I mentioned, I'm just back from a land-based cruise. I often get asked on these lives, do I do lives or don't? Yeah, sorry, do I do land-based trips or not? I do, and one of the things that I always reminded when I go on a land trip is, unlike when I go on a cruise, I always put on weight on a land-based trip. So when I go on a cruise, I really put on a weight, maybe a pound here or something like that, and it's because you can also eat lots, obviously, and eat really well, but you can eat salads and fish and whatever, and I exercise lots because, of course, the gym is just there. On a land-based trip like we were in an Airbnb, so we did go to the gym a couple of times, but it's quite complicated. You have to drive there and you have to book passes and all that sort of stuff. So it's just interesting coming back with the challenge from vacation, putting on weight, but you're probably not interested in that. So let's get stuck into the questions. Question from See the World. Good to see you here. And I think there's a follow-on question. So I've been following you even when you were posting hotel reviews. So that's a very long time, because that's when I first started out posting hotels I was staying in. I always knew Oceania was your favorite line. After visiting all the new lines and changes across so many, what's your top fave? So Oceania was never actually my favorite line. I did speak very highly of Oceania, but it was sort of one of the top. I get asked a lot, what is my favorite line or favorite lines? And I'm going to give you an answer. I'll tell you kind of my sort of top mix of those, but I actually don't have a favorite cruise line, because a lot of that is driven by where I'm going and who I'm going with and what I'm really looking for from the itinerary. So I am quite itinerary driven. And obviously, because of the channel, I will travel on many lines that maybe are not the lines I would normally go on. So, next year I've booked things like on Norwegian, the Aqua ship, which I really want to try out, both for research purposes, for the channel purposes, but it may not be the top. So in terms of my favorite lines, if I was cruising only for me or cruising with me and, say, Mark, I would probably still have Oceania as one of those kind of top lines there, because it's quite a nice mix between, it's a small enough ships, kind of 1,200, because they're obviously jettisoning most of those small ships. So it's a nice size ship. They have very interesting itineraries. They have good food, but they do have, because of the size, they have big enough shows. They have a good, decent sized casino, enough choice, dining choices and that sort of stuff. And the itineraries are pretty good. So actually Oceania is my next but one trip, which we're going from Sydney across all the islands to, I'm going the wrong way, to French Polynesia. So really interesting itinerary, which not many lines do it with that intensity. I do really enjoy going on Regent. When the budget allows, we can get good deals. Like my next cruise I'm going on is Regent Cruise. Got a very good deal on that. I do really like even a smaller ship. Again, very interesting itineraries, good food. But then it's very much about the itinerary. I do also always have a great time on Holland America. So I've got a lot of Holland America trips next year. I've got my group cruise, and then I'm spending a month on Holland America on Oosterdam. But I always have a good time on Holland America. Their ships, the sort of Vista class ships especially, although I do like the newer ships, about 2,000 passengers, you have lots of more stuff going on, good enrichment and stuff like that. So let me think. Of the sort of the resort things, I probably do lean more towards Norwegian. Of those kind of groups of those, I do quite like Norwegian, particularly from an entertainment perspective. So it sort of depends a little bit on where I'm going. Cunard used to be one of my tops. It's not really anymore, other than the transatlantic. I feel they kind of, I'm not sure that they really deliver. I know the Queen's Grill is amazing, but for the price of Queen's Grill, you can go, if you are going to go on Queen's Grill, you can go on a Silver Sea, a Seabourn, or whatever. So that's probably a mix. I don't sure I've quite answered your question that well. John asking the question about which cruise line shows you more of the west coast of Africa. So there's a couple there, and I know Sea the World has answered that as well. But there's a couple of lines that do pretty good itineraries. Regent, if your budget stretches that far, have a very nice West Africa itinerary. That was one that I had booked on, but actually cancelled it because some of the ports they were calling on, again, come back to when they go to lots of ports in West Africa, but two of the ports required a yellow fever vaccine. And actually, if you head into South Africa, which is where it ends, if you've been to any ports or countries that require yellow fever, you also have to have a yellow fever vaccine. Now, you can get dispensations, certificates against it, but certainly my oncologist was adamant that I shouldn't have the yellow fever. Also, when I spoke to him again, anyone over 60 is not really recommended the yellow fever vaccine. Now, if you've had yellow fever at any age, that whoops, my drink over there, that it still applies. So the changes. So if you've ever had it in your 20s or 30s, it applies. I'm sure I may have had it, but I couldn't find any record of it. So my point being that they have very intensive. Now, I've seen some other itineraries. I was looking at some alternatives. There's Oceania did one. I think someone mentioned Azamara did some quite nice itineraries. And you will find that there are a couple of they tend to be the smaller, more luxury ships. So obviously that's quite expensive from a budget perspective. But there is Holland America do a very interesting Africa itinerary. Now they do a whole big loop of Africa. So it's quite a big, that's a long trip and probably may include parts of Africa that you don't want, but that you may be able to buy a leg of that. Also Norwegian, if again, looking from a budget perspective, when they often base a ship out of South Africa, now they're changing some of their, where they're basing ships, so they may not do this anymore, but obviously to get the ship down there, heading down West Africa. But certainly, look, Azamara, Oceania, so some of those smaller ship lines, Silver Sea region, they all do it as well. So unfortunately, they all tend to be a little bit more on the pricey side because I guess also being smaller ships makes more sense. But Azamara could be a nice kind of combo there, although they are pretty pricey. Elena's here. Welcome back. Lady Golfer as well, we're back from Palm Springs base. Bill, this is an interesting question that Bill asked. I'm looking at cruises that offer free or reduced airfare for booking with them. Is this a good deal? In reality, Bill, you won't really find any that include it as such. But what you will find, Regent, so again, way high budget level, they are probably the only line now that Silver Sea have changed it that do include some airfares within their price. But in reality, you're paying for it anyway, because if you're asked to strip out the airfare, you get a very kind of low credit. Low dispensation for that. But what you will find is a lot of cruise lines will offer you to add on airfare. So, and they may give you a price. Now, when I've looked at that, it's not normally that much cheaper. Or if it is cheaper, it's because they're doing very complicated routings. So I often strip it out. So I was once doing a trip where I was looking, if I compared what the routing was the cruise line was offering, it was going to Cape Town. They're offering this very complicated route where I can go direct. The same when I was doing, I needed to get to Santiago, when I was doing Holland America. Their routing, again, had me routing via when I could go direct. And again, it wasn't a particularly good deal. So very few cruise lines now bundle it in. What you could do, though, Bill, based on where you are, is certainly in the UK, there's a couple of cruise agencies tend to be a little bit more online agencies. In the UK, there's companies like Bolshova, cruises.co.uk. And what they do is they bundle trips together. So they get a group rate from the cruise line, and then they will bundle in a flight, pre-post stay, stuff and the cruise, and they can be very good value. So another one is Love It, Book It, which they also they have they run sort of an advertorial show on satellite and cable TV, which I love watching, see what they're doing. But they have very good bundles. So look at kind of bundles as well. In the US, I'm sure there's similar ones as well if you're in the US. But you don't find, generally speaking, that cruise lines will include the airfare. What I have seen, and it might be worth looking at, Bill, as we head into the Black Friday sale period, and certainly the wave season, which is the beginning of the year over Christmas, is when the cruise lines go heavy into running activities to encourage people to book. Particularly now, they're releasing a lot of their new itineraries, and then in Black Friday they will do lots of deals. Have a look out if any of those are offering kind of flight credits, because I have seen that happen. Sometimes. Jonathan, good to see you here. Thoughts on Alaska cruise, a 9-day Norwegian Joy Hubbard Glacier versus a 7-day Royal Princess Glacier Bay, about the same price. So Jonathan, a couple of watch outs I would have, and then I'll give you my view is, if you take a look at the Norwegian cruise line, now, if it's a 9-day, it may be the Seattle to Seattle cruise. So I would also look at where it's going from, and I would then take a look at how many of those days, those 9 days, you're actually in Alaska as such. One of the watch outs on some of the Norwegian itineraries out of Seattle is, you'll see, obviously, if it's going out of Seattle, they have to call into normally Victoria, but also because it has longer to get there and get back, they have to call into Victoria because of the Passenger Services Vehicles Act in the US, which requires them to call in a foreign port. They can't just go port to port. So first of all, have a look at how many days you're actually in Alaska and compare it to the Royal Princess trip, which I'm guessing if it's 7 days is probably out of Vancouver. But also then take a look at how long you're in each of the ports. Because one of the things I talked some friends of mine out of doing a Norwegian trip, but I don't think it was on Joy, is when we looked at the time they're in ports for relatively short amounts of time. They're in Juneau, like from 7 a.m. to 1 o'clock and stuff like that. So they didn't have as much time in port to do things. So I would take a look at that as well before that. Now, Hubbard Glacier is pretty magnificent. So, Glacier Bay for me is still kind of the jewel in the crown. You see a number of great glaciers, but Hubbard Glacier is very beautiful. I don't know if the Norwegian offer the excursion where a little boat comes and about 150 people can go out even closer. Keep an eye out for that if it is. So that would be my watch out, is just take a look at how long you're in between the two. If the Norwegian trip is giving you more days in Alaska and is also ticking off Juneau, Skagway, and Ketchikan, because although they're very touristic and they're very called on, they're called on for a good reason. There's some great excursions there. If they call on those three, they're in port for a long time, and you're in Alaska more, I would go with that particular routing. I'm trying to think if there's anything else there. Obviously, there's a difference between Princess is sort of premium class, Norwegian is more resort class, but depending on what cabin you're in, you could find the prices are relatively similar. Happy Thanksgiving to Canadian brothers and sisters. So I guess it's Canadian Thanksgiving. That so then definitely happy Thanksgiving. Mary Smith, we're taking our first cruise in the spring. Exciting. Queen Mary 2 to Southampton, and then we plan to rent a place in Bologna for a month. Is it possible for my husband to rent a tux on board the Queen Mary 2? So Mary, there is, they do have a tux rental service on board. However, I wouldn't what I would suggest, if your husband has a dark suit or a suit and tie, in reality, that is perfectly fine. He doesn't have to wear a tux. So if he's got a suit, if it's a dark suit, even better. But if he's got a suit and a tie already in the cupboard, take that with you, and that will absolutely be perfectly fine for formal nights. Also, what's important to note is, although it hasn't been that public, if you look at the latest dress code for Cunard, you'll actually see that on formal nights, they have shifted that to be optional. it used to be required. So before, if you didn't wear formal wear, you were not allowed into the main restaurants. But certainly, and I guess they change it back, but certainly what they now have is it's more optional. So you could theoretically also wear smart dress on 4 nights, but certainly suit and tie, 100% fine. If he wants to get a tux and rent it, they do have that on board. It's in the shop, the shops, they have it there. And so that's fine. Lewis here, which is great. Jeff is here. Good to see you, Jeff, as well. Caroline missed it. Let's have a look. Lots of people been traveling, by the way. So Tom, watching from Facebook, just a reminder, when I do live stream, this live stream goes out on LinkedIn and also goes out on Facebook. Someone's apparently there's a slight delay, but Tom was sitting on Crystal Serenity. I guess when we did the last one when I was in Palm Springs, I think you were just boarding that as well. Warren asking the question around, do you book your future region cruises on board to get additional benefits? So Warren, what I do try and do as much as possible is, because I plan my cruises way out in advance. So like I've got the beginning and end of 27 already done. I haven't got the middle quite sorted yet. So I sort of scope out what I want those to be. And then I sort of have looked ahead. So if I know that I have another region trip lined up, I will actually sort of, there's not a better deal going, because there's other deals going, early, like Region does early booking deals where you get pre and post days included, for example, or a 1 category upgrade. So if that to me often outweighs waiting till I'm on board. But if normally I do is I wait until I'm on board to book it. Now I can't remember on Regent specifically, but if I know I want to go on that line like a Regent, but I haven't locked it in because they haven't released the itineraries, I would buy the voucher. So for example, when I was on Silver Sea, I knew that there was another itinerary that they'd done they were doing in 25 and they were doing in 26, but they hadn't released 27 yet. But I wanted to do that. I knew specifically I wanted to do it on Silver Whisper. So what I did on board is I bought, you could pay, I think it was $500 US. For me, it was 300 UK pounds. And it would give me the extra 5% discount, the ability to change the booking at least once, which in the UK is quite good because you often can't do that without a penalty. And I think that's some extra onboard credit, not a lot of onboard credit. So I bought that certificate. They then released the itineraries, and then I could use that to get the deal. So it's a long way of answering the question, but generally speaking, if there's an itinerary that I know that I want to do, I keep an eye on any promotions, because sometimes Region do really good promotions. So just watch out for that. Often with Regions you can get the grade up. They're running a promotion at the moment. Back to the question around flights in the UK, where they're adding business class flights into their offer, where normally you get an economy class flight for their all-inclusive fare. So you could argue that may outweigh the benefit of booking on board. Genevieve asking the question, what is the minimum amount of time left in the UK passport for travel to Spain and Morocco? Genevieve, offhand, I do not know the answer, but I'm going to tell you how you can double check this. But generally speaking, if you go anywhere, it's normally 6 months that they want before the end of a passport. So the general rule of thumb, I was trying to make sure that I've got at least 6 months before I go into any place. But what I also do, Genevieve, is I would go to the Foreign Office. So type into Google FCO, so Foreign and Commonwealth Office, but put in FCO Spain or FCO Morocco, and that will then bring up the page for that. And there's a thing called entry requirements, and in there it will tell you the latest. So I always rely on that before I go on a trip, because they constantly update that. You can also, what you can do if you're going to Spain and Morocco, maybe in a while, on that page, you can then ask to be updated if that page gets changed. So if anything on the entry requirement change, they email you. So I've used that quite a lot in the past. That's one thing. The second thing to point out, Genevieve, is from today, the EU in the Schengen zone is rolling out the EEC, their new electronic I've forgotten what EEC stands for, but it's their new system. So when you go into a country for the first time, so if you're flying into Spain as a third country, so non-EU, you're going to have to do the new thing where they take a picture and your fingerprints. So expect things to move much slower as they roll this out. I can't remember if Spain are going this Sunday or not. I think they might be. So when you fly in, it's going to be much slower. But then once it's done, they are going to be hopefully be opening. You'll see when you go to airports now, they've opened EU gates and non-EU gates. So it'll eventually be like when you come into the UK, you can use the gate, so it will speed it up. But just bear that in mind as well. From next year, they are going to then bring out their ESTA there, where you have to get like you fly to the US, you're going to have to pay. In fact, people coming to the UK have to do it now. The electronic travel authorization, but that hasn't rolled out yet. But that EEC is rolling out. So I didn't sort of answer your questions. Rule of thumb: always have 6 months. Try to have 5 or 6 pages blank, which you won't really need, because the point of this new system is they're not going to stamp it. But that's the general thing. But that FCO thing is the key thing. Highland Cottage Books. I'm bidding on an upgrade to an atrium view on the Queen Mary 2. Any strategy I should know about? So yes, a couple of things there. And this is true of anybody who's doing an upgrade. So if you get an email which is offering you an upgrade, like my next trip, I'm giving them every couple of days to bid. But first of all, it doesn't necessarily mean because you're being asked to bid that it exists, because these are automated emails. So the fact that you're being offered the ability to bid on an upgrade to atrium view room doesn't necessarily mean that one is available at all. What you could do is just go online, do a sort of a dummy booking, put in the dates, and have a look and see if atrium view rooms are coming up. So that'll give you a sense if there's likely to be. Now, of course, people may cancel. People who atriums might bid to upgrade to another cabin, so it may become free. But just have a look and see, first of all, if any are available. If they are available, look at what it will cost if you were to upgrade what you've booked now to go into an atrium view. So if you say the difference between what you've paid now for your cabin is 100 and an atrium view is 200, make sure that you do not bid more than 100, because you could just upgrade yourself now without bidding. So seeing what the price difference is gives you a sense of, okay, so the maximum I should probably bid is 100, because that's, why would you bid 100 anyway? Because you can just do it online. You can do it with your travel agent anyway. So always bid under that amount, because there's no point bidding over, because even if you get it, you're going to it's done, because you could have done it, could have just upgraded yourself. So also have a look, and if you say, actually, I would be more than happy to bid that 100, just do it, upgrade anyway, because you're happy to bid what it's going to cost you anyway, if you know what I mean. So that's the key thing, is may not exist. Make sure you don't overpay for an upgrade, and bear in mind that it may not exist at all. So for example, what I did for this region, I didn't want to upgrade because I've got like a balcony cabin, and they're all pretty good on Regent ships. And the price per night is quite high. In fact, I got a very good deal, so it's not that high. But I haven't upgraded. But I also, what I do now, the thing. What I always do is I go and look at the layouts of the cabins, where they are, to make sure that I want them. Now you obviously know the atrium views. You know what they are. But one of the tactics I always do is look at where those are and make sure that you'd be happy to move to them. Let's have a look. Okay, a question about Vegas. What shows did you see in Vegas? What is your preferred hotel? So Archery Champion, on this particular trip, we went to see The Wizard of Oz at the Sphere, which was fantastic. And I was pretty skeptical about it, but I did want to see the Sphere. I'd heard some good things about The Wizard of Oz. My mother-in-law was really keen to go and see it. So we went to see it. It was brilliant. It really was good. Obviously, seeing the Sphere was fantastic. For those who don't know what they've done with The Wizard of Oz, they've taken the original film, because the Sphere is enormous and vast, it's sort of, you're surrounded right down that side. They've then used AI and different techniques to extend the film, so it's all around you. They've then built in some immersive things, that when that hurricane hits you, saw these leaves blow about. When the apple trees attack you, these apples come flying down. I was lucky enough to grab one, so I got Brownie Mother points by giving her an apple. They've cut about 15 minutes out of it by cutting some of the song down. So it was fantastic. But in the past, I've been to see many of the shows. So I've seen Car, which I love, a couple of times. We saw, I forgot what it's called now, the new one at the Wynn. It's an Enchantment. I've seen, what else have we seen? I haven't seen The Bad Apple, the new one at New York. I saw the show before that. And the Michael Jackson 1 show, which is fantastic. Seen that as well. What have we seen? Else have I seen there? But on this one, we saw that one. Now, in terms of preferred hotels, so we stayed at lots of hotels over the years. I think it was probably my 12th or 13th trip to Vegas. So over the years, we've changed different places. Our preferred hotel is always MGM, because I only gamble at MGM to collect MGM points, and therefore you get comped rooms. So Mark gambles more, he goes in more often, so his rooms get completely comped. So we stayed at the Nomad on the way out, the first stay in Vegas at the beginning, where he got one of the big suites completely comped and resort credit and all that sort of stuff. But with my stuff, we got my mother-in-law a room which was an Italia room. So Nomad, I really liked Nomad a lot, which is the top 4 floors of Park MGM. On the way back, we stayed at the W, which we stayed at last Christmas, which used to be the Delano, now the W. I quite like that. It's not fantastic because they've rebranded. Four Seasons is very nice. We used to like that, which is the top 4 floors of Mandalay Bay, because it has a pool, which is not a manic pool, lots of shade. I used to like Vidara a lot, which is becoming a little bit shabby, but that's a great location. Aria, we stayed at 2 Christmas ago, which I really liked. The only hotel I stayed at, which I wasn't really keen on, was the Waldorf, which used to be the Shangri-La, then the Waldorf. But generally speaking, an MGM hotel. Now, I haven't stayed at MGM Grand, which Mark has, which they're renovating all the rooms, which I would like to stay at. So I tend to I also like it because it's a non-smoking casino, so Park MGM Nomad. But certainly if I was going back there, I would stay in Nomad if I could afford an Italia room, which is really nice, a really nice room. Park MGM is really good value as well. So a long rambling question there. Now, someone had popped in, Carl had popped in a super chat thing. I think that's what it's called. Thanks very much. Have you heard any new warnings in any Mexico ports? I haven't seen any updates on Mexico. And I do, a little bit I said earlier, I do have alerts on some of these ports. I haven't seen any new updates, so I will take a look into that. But I haven't seen any new ones. But certainly some of the Mexico travel advisories are quite high. But if you ever look at them both on the State Department side and on the Foreign Office, they tend to break it down by region. So a lot of those ports, they're often kind of with caution. Some of the parts are not. Now, I did see an elevated in Matalan a little while ago, so that may be what you're referring to, and I can't remember why it was slightly raised in Matalan, because I did also see some people commenting on how they hadn't really gone kind of exploring there. But the 2 sites I rely on is the State Department site, which is really good, and then the Foreign Office site are really good. And often when I'm going on trips, I will do a quick double check on those 2 sites. Francis, I haven't sailed on Hurtigruten. I would definitely take a look at Hurtigruten. I would love to go on Hurtigruten. The other one to take a look at, Francis, is take a look at their new competitor, which is Havila, Havila. They run very similar routes through Norway. They have kind of hybrid ships. Their ships are a little bit more modern. So I haven't been on those either. A couple of people have been on those, more on kind of press trip sites, but some of my patrons have been on recently, had a really good time on it, indeed. So take a look at that as well. But certainly those intensive Norway ones are pretty good. Diana and Andrew are here calling all ports. Good to see you here. Vegas was fantastic. We spent in reality more time in Palm Springs this time in Vegas, but I always have a great time in Vegas. Would you ever consider doing a Vegas video or more land-based travel videos? So probably the short answer is Probably not. I have on occasion, I've done some land-based trips, sort of done those, but partly because of what the audience expects. And I guess what YouTube have learned from me is that, what they expect is they don't do as well for me. So I tend to do more kind of short, sharp kind of Insta stories or shorts kind of stuff. Even when I do more kind of port-based stuff, that is kind of more mixed for me. People seem to really just want to watch very much more ship-focused stuff. But yes, I would do. I mean, part of the reason I don't, to be honest, Diana and Andrews, I don't do more land-based is often that is proper vacation. So this trip was kind of vacation because I can't, even when I go on a cruise, if it's supposed to be vacation, I can't resist filming it. So landers often ends up being more, okay, I'm going to relax kind of thing. So that's also it's a kind of combination of things. Just wanted to write the word question so I don't miss questions, but this one I didn't miss. Krista, we're going on our first cruise on an Oasis class ship. Do you have any tips for first timers? So, Krista, what I would do is have a look at my if you go to search Royal Caribbean, and you'll get a little bit of some videos there around that. But I think probably the key thing for first timers is I would, before you go, make sure that you've pre-booked as much as you possibly can. These are big ships, very busy, very active. So make sure that you've locked in bookings for anything that you possibly can book. That's really, really key. Whether it's packages, dining packages, Wi-Fi packages, excursions, and then take a look at shows now and decide when you're going to go to the shows. Now, certainly, I need to just try and remember back, but certainly often you can book shows or make sure that you have a space in shows. So like the water class, the water shows and that sort of stuff, you sort of need to make sure that you're on the list. So some of those you have to do on board, but try and basically book everything that you possibly can. The other thing that I would say is, and I suspect maybe because you're here, you've done it anyways, take a look at a couple of ship tours so that you kind of have a good real sense of the ship and what you want to do. But if you want to do, flow riders and stuff like that, try and lock those in. The other thing is, if you do want to do some of those activities, and maybe pick one of the ports that you're less excited about and use that to do some of those activities when there's fewer kind of cruise, people, etc. around. The other thing, of course, is make sure the other thing is generally boarding. I'm not sure where you're boarding, but certainly if you're boarding any of the Florida ports, they are really very good at checking people in. So just make sure you've done all the checking in stuff. You've got all your QR codes or whatever it is that you need, because you'll find it's really, really quick in terms of getting in. Tom, do you have any feedback on Ponant, Tauck cruise and land activities? Now, I haven't been on Tauck, but certainly people who go with Tauck love Tauck, and they talk how just fantastic both their river cruise ships are, but how good their land-based escorted tours are. In terms of Ponant, I've never done any land activities with Ponant. I've only done cruises with Ponant, so I can't comment on Ponant, but I haven't done either. But certainly Tauck people rate very highly, and that's obviously their background is starting in land-based tours, and they have incredible reputation for that. Let's have a slug here. Just a reminder, write the word question. I see there's quite a few here coming in, because if I don't see the word question, I sometimes assume it's a comment, so I don't necessarily pull it up. So let me just have a slug of this. Anthony, with Norwegian Cruise Line's new policy on their private islands free drink package exclusion and Princess non-refundable deposits, are the lines getting greedy like the exorbitant resort fees at Las Vegas? Good question. I mean, I think what we're seeing generally is, the cruise lines, as I guess land-based resorts they're starting to take things out. And I guess what they're doing is they are trying to hold, this is my theory anyway, I don't have any proof of this. They want to try and hold fare level increases to seem to be quite low, because people, particularly these big ships, some of the big princess ships, they're getting really big, certainly the Sun and Star, also with Norwegian, it's about getting people on board and selling once they're on board. So if you look at any of their quarterly reports to Wall Street, they all talk about how their fares are going up. They get more through demand. So as ships are fuller, they can charge more. But they talk a lot about how the onboard spend is growing really fast, and that's a big priority for them. I guess it's high margin. So I guess what they're trying to do is keep fares fairly tight. So starting to strip things out is obviously one way of doing it. What's interesting with Norwegian and the drink package exclusion on private islands is most of the lines of private islands, you couldn't use your drinks package anyway. So in some ways, they're sort of harmonizing with the others. But the problem is when you take it out, of course, you're effectively reducing value for people. The Princess non-refundable deposits, I hadn't actually picked up that one. So that's interesting, because I know Silversea, with their changes, have moved away from refundable deposits. Certainly in the UK, the problem is whenever you book something, it's non-refundable deposit. So that's become the norm. So I guess they kind of moving across. But yes, I think we're going to see, with prices still kind of quite high, I do think we will see kind of a tightening. There's a lot of pressure on improving profitability. And it's really interesting, as an aside, is Carnival recently, in their most recent results, spoke about how the CEO was talking about how he's very happy within their portfolio with two lines. He's very happy with the profitability of Carnival, and he's very happy with the profitability of AIDA, their German line, and how those two lines have a very good grip on costs and profitability. His implication was that the others within their fleet had more of a job to do. So we've seen a lot, so Princess obviously being one of those. I suspect there's a lot of pressure on them because they're a very big line within the portfolio to become more profitable. But by definition, across all the other lines, it's interesting because the new builds they have coming are only for those lines. None of the other lines have new builds coming. And we've also seen that recently where TUI, which is the joint venture between TUI Cruises, which is a joint venture between Royal Caribbean and the TUI Travel Corporation, they switched out some new builds that had been penciled in for Marella, which is the UK-based sort of value line, and shifted it across to Mein Schiff. And what they said is because Mein Schiff is much more profitable. So I think what we're seeing is coming out of the pandemic, dust settling, is a big push on the cruise lines to improve profitability. So I'm guessing we're seeing some of this stuff happening. So that's kind of my theory. So I think we're going to see more of that. Asia's Curiosity, good to see you here. We're considering a 3-week cruise in Asia. What itinerary would you suggest as being the top one to do? Keep up the good work, Alison. Ian, so great to see you here. So 3 weeks is fantastic. What I would strongly encourage you to have a look at is if you can find an itinerary which includes the following. So I've done a very nice itinerary like this, was on Kuno, but they don't do it anymore. But there are other lines that do it. But one which is going to get you to see Hong Kong, Singapore, Shanghai, parts of Korea, and Japan. So you want something that's going to cover those sort of areas. Now you can find some of this. Sometimes they're repositioning cruises, but some of them will go out of Hong Kong and kind of do a loop round. But so take a look at Oceania, take a look at Azamara, take a look at Silversea, but also if you take a look at Holland America and Princess, now they tend to base ships more in Japan, so they tend to do seasons, but at the beginning, end of season, they sort of have to get the ships there. But that perfect itinerary is one that gets you to see all of those. Now, if as a added bonus, you can get one that includes Taiwan, even better. But definitely that's what I focus on. Now, if you find it's more challenging, I would then do something that make sure that you include Japan. Now, there's some really good Japan itineraries where you can do Japan and then we'll head off down to Hong Kong, or from Hong Kong up into parts of Japan, for example, as well. But those would be the ones that I would strongly suggest. Now, a lot of people may talk more about, Vietnam, Thailand, Bali. But for me, that is the strong I'd recommend. Now, it's interesting you asked this question because I partly scoped out a video around cruising in Asia, which I was dithering about doing. But maybe based on this question, I should do. But I talk a little bit about the different itineraries. But that's the one for me is just brilliant. It's just brilliant. Jason, I've recently joined your YouTube. Thank you very much. I've never done a cruise, but in the next few years, I'd like to go with Oceania cruise around South America. Have you completed this trip? So, Jason, I have not done the trip on Oceania. I've done part of around South America from Valparaiso down to Buenos Aires. But next year, I'm doing 3/4 of it, but I'm doing on Holland America out of Buenos Aires all the way around Lima, eventually Panama Canal into Miami. So it's a 31 night. So I've done that sort of part of it, but I haven't done the top part and that part. But certainly around South America is fantastic. The key thing I would say, Jason, is do lots of looking at excursions. Now what you find with that, you find it's quite a nice pace of trip because you tend to have sea days, port, sea days, port. So it's not massively port intensive. So you want to make sure, as you say, go to a line like Oceania that has really good enrichment. So you're well prepared for the ports. Budget quite a lot of money for excursions because some of the key best things to see are quite far inland. Also, what I would say is one of the reasons I chose Holland America for that, and I don't know what Oceania does it, is when it gets to Lima, it's port called Cacao, I can't remember the exact name of it, C-A-O-U, but it's a port for Lima. But it has 3 nights there, which means that you can do an excursion to Machu Picchu. So that's what I'm doing. And they offer an included excursion, not included, you have to pay for it. But so some of those things. So I would try and look for an itinerary that makes sure that you have some overnights that you can go right inland. Also, there's some things like the incredible falls from Buenos Aires. So you want to also be looking at some of those ones which are going to get you further inland. But certainly a lot of the excursions I did are quite long excursions, day excursions, because you're going to go inland to see things. Sometimes the ports you call on are not that interesting because they're kind of tiny little ports. Even on Holland America, in a big ship we would tender in, the actual town itself, there's not a lot there. So you need to budget a lot on the excursion side would be as well. Yes, I agree. Warren's making the point. So I should have also made that point is, for those who were earlier, I didn't want to go to an area where you have to have a vaccine for yellow fever without a vaccine for yellow fever. So that's the same point is why I cancelled as well, because once I knew I couldn't get that. So let's have a look. So you wouldn't count Explorer in your top 3. Oh, so KB asking, so I guess you're asking me about Explorer journeys. I'm guessing I'm assuming you're asking me Explorer journey rather than Regent Explorer or something. Probably not. I liked Explorer journeys. I thought it was pretty nice. I know it's very popular. People are very excited about Explorer journeys. I thought it was pretty nice. And I would go back. I did have a cruise booked, but I cancelled it because timing didn't work. I don't have a burning passion to go back, but I will go back, particularly when they get more diverse itineraries, which are coming when they launch 3 and 4. The itineraries, they focus very much on the Caribbean, the Med. They're starting up with some in the Middle East, but certainly when 3 and 4 come, they're doing more in Asia. I think some in South America. Once some more interesting itineraries come along, like at the moment, a lot of the itineraries they offer are places that I've been to quite a lot. So for me, I would want more of an itinerary-driven thing before I head back on Explorer. Also, for the price of Explorer, depending on what deal you can get, you can actually go kind of a notch above. So that in my top 10, they're probably there, but they're not. I know people get very excited about Explorer journeys, and I like them rather than get very excited about them, if that makes sense. Steinwald Madchen, good to see you. Having only cruised Creamery 2, how to adjust expectation on smaller luxury ships. Taking Mitsu Ocean this year, wow, and planning Ascura. Both seems to be leaning to traditional side. I'd love to see how you get on with those two. For those who don't know, those are Japanese lines, and some of them, is it Mitsu run the seaborne ships. So I was actually looking, because people had asked me a lot about whether I would try Ascura or Mitsu as one of the times when I do my Japanese, so I really know how you're doing. But in terms of adjusting, Queen Mary 2 is. I always think that people think Cunard is, because of their advertising, is very luxurious. I don't see Cunard as a particularly luxurious cruise line. I see it as a premium cruise line. If you're in Queen's Grill, you have an incredible dining experience. But the rest of the experience is pretty standard. It's pretty standard Holland America Celebrity, Princess. Is the overall experience. So once you get into the smaller ships, the amount. That's when you really notice the attention to detail, greater service. Everything's a little bit more rich and plush. What you won't have is obviously the sort of the bigger shows. You won't have as much enrichment and stuff like that. But you're right. I think you will find it elevated. Now, I can't remember if you travel in Queen's Grill or Princess Grill. The food there is particularly exceptional. I think you'll find the food at least at par, but not as fancy. So I'd be really keen to see on that. Oh, Whips Travel, good question. Good to see you here again. When you cancel a cruise, do you bite the bullet and decide to lose your deposit? I've done that, but it can be a little bit expensive decisions. So, yes is the sort of answer. But what I tend to do, Whips Travel, is because I love spreadsheets, so I will always have got a sense of when I need to cancel by, and have a sense of the terms and conditions to make sure that I can minimize it as much as possible. So when I mentioned that Explorer Journeys, I knew that if I canceled because I booked so far ahead, which helps. So I booked far ahead. So I knew I was canceling the Explorer Journeys, using an example, trip, which was in April of 26, but I was canceling a couple of months ago. And I knew that if I canceled before, and I can't remember the number, so I'll make up the number, but something like 200 and something days before, I would only be charged a fee. And the fee was, I think it was £100, was it £75 or something like that, per person. So I knew that I had a date to decide, and it was I can't remember, it was something like the 1st of November or the 1st of October. So I knew that I had very little to lose by cancelling that. One. Also, at the time, I was looking and considering booking another cruise. I decided not to in the end. So I took that hit, but it wasn't a very big hit. But I knew I literally made sure I booked before it kicked in. Now, with the Regent trip that I mentioned, that I canceled, the West Africa trip, what I then did is I asked my travel agent, Sarah, and said, okay, I'm going to cancel this trip, which is quite an expensive trip. It was like nearly a month-long trip, 3 or 4 week trip. So it was very expensive. And the deposit I would have lost quite a lot. Now, partly because of the yellow fever thing, I had some leverage. But what I asked Sarah to say, look, can you go to them and say, I can't go on this trip. I'm not going to go on this trip. I want to cancel it. But here's a trip I want to go on the same dates. It's not as big a trip, but I'm going to book for those same dates, same cruise line. Can you see what they will offer and go negotiate? And they agreed to just let me not penalize me and move my deposit across. Because I was booking same dates, same time. The cruise I was looking at wasn't particularly full, but I got an amazing deal. They actually gave me an incredible deal on it as well. Because it wasn't particularly full. So I will tend to bite the bullet. As you mentioned, the problem in the UK is, unlike in the US, where you have more refundable deposits. But what I do is I will make sure far in advance, number one. Was that number one or number two? Second thing is I have made sure that I book with my travel insurance. I've taken a level where I can get up to £10,000. So what's that, about $40,000, $50,000 for those in the US? Cancellation, so that if I am going to have to cancel for a particular reason, but it lets me cancel and I could claim back an insurance. I haven't had to do that yet. I've taken the hit because I've always managed to keep them fairly low. So a lot of it make sure I'm playing around with those dates for cancellation and then get my travel. That's the advantage of sometimes having a travel agent. One of the advantages of having a travel agent is, if you talk to someone in the customer service team, no, So what Sarah could do is she could talk to her contact, other contacts in the region, and kind of negotiate. So it's a long way of asking your question, but that's basically how I do that. Bill making notes furiously. The one advantage you've got, Bill, is you can watch this on playback, and it will generate a transcript. I don't get this transcribed, but it will generate a transcript. Kelly, oh, thank you. I'm going to do a bit of promotion. I'm glad Kelly asked us, because I forgot to do this at the beginning. So Kelly's asking, like your overview of premium lines, when will you do the next chapter with luxury or ultra luxury lines? So for those who don't know, I did a review of the premium lines, a comparison, compare and contrast. So I'm now working through other categories. So I'm going to bring this up. It's going to, because I don't want to lose Kelly's, maybe I won't lose Kelly's question if I do this. Out this week is this video, which is looking at the resort lines, so Norwegian, Carnival, MSC, and Royal Caribbean. So that is now out, came out yesterday. That came out yesterday. And in that, I look at those 4 lines. Let me see if I can bring that question back up. No, I've lost the question. Where's it gone? Where's it gone? Here we go. So that's out now. So you can watch the resort lines one. So I put a link to that in the notes of this, or if you go to the channel, it'll be the most recent video. Now the ultra luxury one, I will tell you the exact date it's coming out. So I'm going to look here in my schedule. Let's have a look. So ultra luxury is the next one. So after that one, but that's only going to come out in November. So that's actually currently being edited. So the ultra luxury one will only be out in November. So premium now was last month. Resort line is out this month. Ultra luxury out next month. And then I probably will also do the small ship luxury line one as well. And then I've covered those. In terms of expedition, I've already done that one. So thanks for that little prompt there, Kelly. So please watch the resort one meantime. Caroline, best trips and things to see from the port of Kotor, Montenegro. Now, Kotor is a beautiful, beautiful port. The key thing with that is being up either for sail in or sail out. Now, Caroline, I have been to Kotor maybe 2. I think I'm going again next year. I'm not very. I do one thing. The old town is very interesting. So the first time I went on a tour around the old town. But then what I actually did is behind the old town is you can walk up the hill. So if you're feeling very active, it's a great hike up. You pay a couple of euros. I can't remember what it was. It's maybe 4 or 5 euros. It's the back of the old city, and you can hike right up. There's some ruins at the top there, but you get incredible views through that sort of fjords down onto the ships. For me, that's what I always do. I always say I'm going to do something different. But they also have, you can go on an excursion which has a cable car a little bit further away from the port, which goes right up one of the mountains. You get incredible views. So I would do that kind of more sightseeing stuff. There's also some quite good cycling tours if you wonder which cycles around the sort of fjord as well. That's what I've normally done. I was actually looking, Caroline, recently at Kotor again, because I have a trip next year in May. I'm doing the Windstar sailing ship for the first time, and we call them Kotor. And I looked at the different alternatives there, and I kind of defaulted back into I really want to go up that mountain again. But the cable car looks really good, gives you a different perspective. Donna, thank you very much. Going on the first cruise in a few weeks' time. I'm really pleased to have a fantastic time. Warren, where do you research your flights? So Warren, I always use Skyscanner. So there's an app on the phone, but also on the website, Skyscanner. So if you just type in Skyscanner, it might be skyscanner.net, I can't remember. So whenever I'm going anywhere, I will always look there. And they're quite far ahead. They're about 350 days ahead, something like that, because airlines tend to only release between long haul at that time schedule. So I always look at Skyscanner. What's good with Skyscanner is they have most airlines there. So you can get a real sense of how many direct flights there are, what sort of times they go, if you're going indirect, and you can get a sense, it gives you prices as well. So you get a sense, actually, if I don't go direct, is it way cheaper or not cheaper? It'll give you price for economy. business and first. I don't think it gives you a premium economy price from what I remember. So you get a real sense of that. That's what I often use. I tend, though, because I am obsessed with collecting Avios points to ultimately get free flights, I tend to always try and book one World Alliance flights, so BA or Cathay, American. There's quite a few lines. So I tend to do those so I can build those. I'm fortunate enough because of all my corporate travel from the years and I'm now permanent top tier there. So it's quite good because if I book, I can choose seats from straight away and that sort of stuff. But Skyscanner is my go-to. I always look at Skyscanner first of all. The second thing I look at, I use a site called Seat Guru, which I think is a TripAdvisor company, when I'm trying to choose seats, particularly if now they're a little bit, they're not up to date. Their BA, if you travel in British Airways, their long haul thing is not up to date because BA is evolving new seats and they still have wrong seat configurations. But they're really good for looking at choosing seats. If you're obsessed with seats, they'll show you good seats, and they have green for seats which are really, really good, must get seats, and but more importantly, they have like amber for seats to watch out for. And what's good is it tells you why. And then people have uploaded pictures as well, so you can get a sense of those. So those are the two that I use for flights. Let's have a look. Carol, I'm sure that they're not for me following your excellent review of cruise. I'm sure that they're not for me following your excellent review of river cruises. So thanks for watching that. Is there anything to do on board the boat when in port if you choose? No. There's not. They don't run a daily program. They don't have activities. So if you are, they will always have lunch or food or whatever available, but there's no activities normally laid on because people are out and about. Now, if people are out and about, you normally means you're docked within walking distance of somewhere normally. So you can normally amble into the local town, or if you're not, a lot of them have bikes. So what I've done, for example, that last one I did, is they had bikes, they had regular bikes and e-bikes. I went off and cycled and did exploring, but they don't have any kind of activities as such on board. Right, we're running madly out of time, so let me see if I can get a couple of quick, fast questions in. Some Valt Machen, considering an Antarctic cruise on one of the older ex-research ships, does it make my direct pass less stable? Yes, probably, I would say, because modern ships have stabilizers. If it's a very old research ship, depending on what it is, it probably doesn't have stabilizers, but you can probably check and see if it's got stabilizers. Stabilizers, of course, will make a difference. So if it's a very old ship and doesn't have stabilizers, but you can probably just check the ship and see if it's got stabilizers. But that's the key thing. So the stabilizers will stop it doing that. That motion, there's nothing that you can do. So if you're going through waves, the ship doing that movement through waves, is it the pitch? That's the thing that often makes people feel more seasick, is the pitch rather than the up and down. In terms of preparing for it, whatever you normally use that works for you for motion sickness is perfectly fine. If you're really concerned about it, you can get prescription behind the ear pads, which are worth looking at. It was interesting when I was on the Ponant, we had pretty rough crossing, and it was into the doctor, I noticed was wearing that. A lot of the crew were wearing that, and I asked him, and he said that's what he prescribes to anybody, is the behind the ears. Now, I've never used it. Touch wood, I've been fortunate enough not to get seasick. Probably famous last words. Hiyori, first-time cruiser, luxury. If you're looking to go to Norwegian Fjords in luxury, the top end, of course, you'll find Silversea do some, Seabourn do some, Regent do some. That's kind of your top end. Crystal, that's where, if you really want to go kind of top end, that's the one to look at. Fred asking the question, when is the best time to book a Viking cruise? Do they offer good sales? They don't really offer good sales in reality, because they are very popular and they sell out. So, for example, a couple of months ago, they had already sold out 80-something% of this year, and they've already sold, when I saw the last update, something like 50% of next year. And that was last quarter's update. So they are very popular. They sell out fast. I've never really seen great deals on Viking. But if they do have deals, always sign up for their newsletter, their email newsletter, if they have any offers. Once you've been on a Viking cruise, they will send you almost every week promotional material, but the deals tend to be a little bit more onboard credit and that kind of stuff. So you don't tend to see Viking deals simply because they just sell out. They don't almost need to. Thank you, Caroline. EES, European Entry System, is what I couldn't remember. Mitzi Craft with friends. Hopefully you heard the answer when I was answering the question about cancelling. How do I manage the risk? And I do have travel insurance, absolutely, for cancellation. But hopefully that earlier question answered that. Lisa, we're asking the question, any tips for how to escalate an issue up the chain of command? We had a terrible experience of a twice cancelled Norwegian cruise line, greatly altered itinerary, complaints with Norway. Lisa, it is very difficult. If you have booked through a travel agent, you're going to find it much easier because they will have, through either their personal contacts or through the company, they will have various levels. Because, for example, there will be an area sales manager. There'll be somebody that you can elevate. They can elevate things through. If you literally have booked directly, your only way through in reality is through the customer service people. And you're right, they will kind of bat that away. So the only other little trick that some people use is figure out the email address of someone senior, like the CEO. Sometimes it's quite easy. You can just literally Google email of whoever, I can't remember who's running Norwegian at the moment, email of such and such a person, or just take a look. If you go to the Norwegian site, for example, if you look down the bottom, contact us, or even better, look at the media section. And often the media section, they will have the media people. Now, don't contact the media people because they won't do anything unless you're media, but you'll get a sense of how the emails are constructed. That's my tip. So if they've got, for example, it goes gary.bembridge@tipsfortravellers.com, then I know the structure of the email is gary.bembridge. If it's all just Gary Bembridge so then you can take the person's name and give it a go. That is my main tip. So we have churned through lots of questions. I'm sure I've probably missed some, but I will be back next Sunday. I will always take a look at the questions. I will definitely try and see if there's another way of answering those. Have a look at that video that I mentioned. It'd be great if you watch that. But I will be back next Sunday, same time, same place. Have a great rest of the weekend. Thanks so much for joining, and brilliant questions as always.